Welcome back to the Aftermatch with Kirsten Beav. Come for the rugby, stay for the Aftermatch. I don't know how many people would have been staying for the Aftermatch in Wellington, Beav. You haven't checked the DMs yet, have you?
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
Kirst. But
probably keep it that way, I'd say.
yeah. I just, much like I guess players after losses, probably stay away from social media and the likes. But no, I don't know if the aftermatch would have been too big in Wellington. Wellington can be one of the great places to enjoy an aftermatch down the infamous streets of Wellington, but probably not on this occasion.
Do you think the Boks enjoyed like a full kit 3 a.m. kebab in Courtney Place?
Yeah, well, me and you both know there are some good kebab shops at that time, and a few convenience shops that also offer you traditional pies and chips on the way home. So yeah, I'm pretty sure the box would have sampled some of the best that Wellington has to offer when it comes to the aftermatch, Kirst.
Look, well deserved as well. It was a rich performance. You cannot hide from it. 43-10, a record in the end. But Beav, we'll jump straight into your notes because you can analyse the game like no one else can. What did you notice from that match? And I don't know how you want to do this. I don't know if you want to do it in first half, second half, but what are the main things that you saw?
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating game to analyse, Kirst, and it's one I actually had to watch multiple times because after it live, there was like so many emotions and obviously score lines and what have you. Yeah, you couldn't quite work it out. But having gone back, watched it again, a lot of the first half stuff very similar to what I thought live. First half, you thought first of all you thought an amazing game of footy, a brutal game of footy, and you just thought classic All Black Springboks sort of game we're going into as far as the second half goes. I personally, maybe it was my one-eyedness towards the All Blacks or the fact that I'm a Kiwi. I thought the way we'd played in that first half, we might actually be able to kick away a little bit. I thought we'd played at a nice tempo. In the first half, it was really noticeable that the All Blacks were going to whiff and going to whiff at any cost. And by doing this, they'd clearly seen at Eden Park that they just weren't able to get that last pass to the edge. They were getting shut down often around that centre position because of the box line speed. Well, this week and in particular in that first half, they were able to hold their depth. They still had the forwards in their pod setups, I guess you'd call them, for common term for them. But they were able to pull the ball out of the back of those through back to a midfield back or back to a first five, and then they had huge depth. You're talking, I'd say 30 or 40 metres in depth to the outside channels. And what that was doing, it was meaning that those guys who the Boks always traditionally bring line speed in that middle of the park, they actually couldn't shut the pass off. They couldn't get there quick enough. So we were getting it to the edges. We were getting it to Leroy Carter and the likes in space. And of course, one of those moments led to Leroy Carter scoring one of the best tries you'll ever want to see, Curse, on Test debut. So that was what I was seeing early. I saw great control from our game that had Damien McKenzie in the wide channels kicking. I thought that was an aspect of the game, which again was very encouraging in that first half because it had been something I guess this so-called pundit had sort of been screaming out for, the ability not just to be entering into these box kickathons, but
You reckon
instead
he listens,
shifting.
Beav?
I'm not sure if Race has got enough time in his Monday to Friday to watch all of the special aftermatch drops because there's more than one obviously during a week. But I'm
I
sure he
think he's a
listens.
subscriber.
Yeah, he might be a
Be like
subscriber.
Razor and make sure you subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess those were the big takeaways from me as far as the All Blacks in the first half goes. I thought the box came out in that first 2 or 3 minutes, and you thought, oh yeah, the box are here today physically because they were just back to their brutal best. You got to look at that forward pack, and you know that they're going to bring physicality. There was so much experience and I guess a hard edge to that, but they just weren't capitalising at times, Curse. When you think back to, I'm trying to think, was it Sneyman who got on quickly and scored a try, but it got ruled out because he had dropped it. Then there was the heroics from Geordie Barrett stripping Cheslin Kolbe over the line. So they had a few missed chances and they split us a couple of times too, doing little plays, I guess, holding up the midfield and then getting around the edge with some of their extreme pace. And you thought, geez, they're leaving a few points out here. Are they going to rue that? But obviously, halftime comes Kirst, and she turns into a different game in that second half.
Not for the first 20 minutes of the second half, though. And I know, Beav, that they did score a couple of tries. The Cheslin Kolbe second, he then comes off the field. Willemson scores as well. But it's only 14 points at that point. That's not game over completely, is it?
No, and I guess the one thing we did sort of just skip there from the first half was the 14-point swing in the Cheslin Kolbe first try. When Billy Proctor lets that pass go, I thought it was a try the other way. And then, of course, Cheslin Kolbe being one of the world's greatest players, has other ideas. But you did right. That second half, just more toing and throwing. And then...
Sorry, I was just going to get you to talk through that Cheslin Kolbe moment. Why was it so remarkable?
Well, the thing that I found remarkable around the Cheslin Kolbe intercept is, okay, highlight the point. We were 4-on-1 there. We were walking in that one ourselves. Maybe Carter gets a double on debut in his first half. Secondly, everyone knows the punishments now around intercepts and the big swing that can have in a game. So you don't see guys going intentionally after too many these days. And then thirdly, okay, Cheslin Kolbe's decided he's going to go the intercept route. But if you saw the end-on picture that Sky produced for us there in one of the replays, his body movements, for all intents and purposes, you can see why Proctor thought that, beautiful, I've got Cheslin here, he's squared up to me, he's come to tackle me, I'm flicking it on. And then just at that last minute, as it's just leaving Billy Proctor's hands, you can see him have the ability, changes his body shape, changes his angle, gets in the passing lane, and, well, we all know that no one's catching him once he's got that in that situation, Kirst.
So not many players in the world could do that because they don't have, like, the speed to come this way and then go.
Well, it's the speed and agility to do the movements he did in the first place. It's also the confidence and backing yourself that, you know what, I'm not worried about getting sin-binned here. I'll just get the intercept, and it's a 14-point swing.
To see that.
Oh, it is. And he really is truly one of the modern-day greats of our game. So as hard as it was being an All Black fan on the night watching it, it was still special to see him go.
Okay, so talk us through the second half then. Because as I say, the first part of the second half was very different to the last part where it was just tries galore.
Yeah, and there were some moments in that first sort of 20 minutes that you just continued to think this is just going to be one of those tests. Yes, the Boks got that try early in the second half, well, early-ish in the second half, and then they got the penalty from Tupavai's, was it a semi-shoulder charge or whatever that was?
They sent Cheslin off the field.
They sent Cheslin off the field. But you still thought it was just one of those games toing and froing. We started to lose our line out a bit, Kirst, and unfortunately that's obviously one of the set-piece plays or parts of the game that you always want to launch your attack from.
Why did they take Samasoni off so early?
Yeah, I don't know if it was what they were seeing around the park from a fitness point of view. Was he blowing? He wouldn't have played. Yeah, he played 40 or 50 minutes at Eden Park. So you'd think, conditioning wise, he would have been fairly sharp. But I just felt some of our option taking in that second half, some of our kicking started to let us down. And I guess the noticeable thing for me, Kirst, is it didn't seem to be well communicated. And when you look at some of our kicking, there was only ever one chaser. And yes, sometimes in general play, you kick it just because you see something, you kick it, and the rest of the team can get on board and get the chase line formed and then get secure. Where we were kicking off set piece, and sometimes we had one chaser. There was a line out there, the second half, 20 minutes to go. We were still only down by 7 or 10, and we put a kick over. And Wallace is the only one chasing, and it was a chip kick over the midfield, but the midfielders were all back 20 or 30 metres, so they weren't on it. So all of a sudden you're thinking, geez, what were we in tune there? Did we know it was happening? There was another chip kick that went in when I think we had about a 7-on-3 when we were coming out of our own 30. And again, if they had their time again, I think they would have probably wanted to launch from it. So, what's the communication going on there, Kirst? Because that's such a big thing. And then once a few of these things didn't go our way, the Springboks started to get that set piece, which obviously everyone's made a big deal of the line out. Obviously, they get the line out steal off us 5 metres out from our line. And then I dare say Lebok took his life in his own hands and asked for the ball as opposed to let the Springbok forward packs rumble one over, get it to Willemson. He does his thing, who I thought was absolutely outstanding on the night, Kerr. Started the game as a 12, which raised some eyebrows at the start of the week. His footwork and physicality in the 12 jersey was sharp. Then he went to a position he's probably more familiar with in 15 and was just as effective. Him and Lebok were a lovely 1-2 combination as far as, dare I say it, the dual playmaker. And they did a wonderful job. But why I say Lebok took his life in his own hands, Keris, is when you are picking and going and you're a metre out and you've got the Springbok forward pack doing that, you sort of think it's inevitable they will get the job done. But as so often happens when that sort of thing's unfolding, opposition defensive squeeze right up, called for it, fed Willemson, and he did the rest. And all of a sudden they've got that 2-try buffer. And then from there, you just start to see the ability of the Springboks. They squeeze the All Blacks again at set piece. The All Blacks had their own set piece wobbles down there. They kick it back. Damien and Will Jordan do exactly what you want to do when you're receiving high balls. One goes up, catches it. Will Jordan catches it. Damien drops the ball. They get turnover. And then the cross kick to big Peter Steph, who was in so much space. And then covering Ruben Love was never going to be able to shut that try down. And then all of a sudden, the game starts to disappear. Then of the interjection and I guess our first real seeing of this big winger hooker.
People warned us about hooker. There were people commenting on our podcast in the last 2 weeks saying, cannot wait for you to be introduced to Ethan Hooker. We can't wait for the world to see this kid. Well, we saw him. We saw him in Wellington.
Yeah,
I couldn't miss him.
No, and I think the world is going to see a fair bit of him when you think they've got Cheslin on one wing, Ardens is injured at the moment, and then this guy Hooker, who's a different shape, obviously, compared to the other two. He's a bigger athlete, but geez, he looks fast too. And again, a concern though, when he makes his big run in the second half, which inevitably leads to another try, we had guys down there, and we had the opportunity, I guess, to squeeze him and force some pressure of our own. But I don't know, through poor communication, we didn't have our chase line organised, and he went through. And then talking about communication, Kirst, again, you look at Snyman's try, where, I mean, yes, Big RJ's an athlete, but he went through daylight. And
well, are you saying he shouldn't have scored that try, Beav?
I think he'd be the first to admit he hasn't scored too many from 20 out untouched. And again, for me, it's what sort of communication was in the line getting presented, because there's bodies around, there's people around. Fabian Holland obviously rushes out trying to bring some physicality and intent, but unfortunately he doesn't get anyone, leaves a hole, and all of a sudden it's try, and it's well and truly game over. So I guess a bit of an underlying theme there, Kirst.
Communication, Beav.
Communication.
I forgot how many times you've mentioned it.
Well, it's funny though, because it's it's probably a soft word, but if you don't have it, it can be disastrous. And when I think about the kick chases, I think about the organisation, and when you think about things like Fabian Holland there, and then you think about Peter Steph the Toit out on his open, what was Ruben Love and the communication like around the defensive line, because Ruben Love was 20 or 30 metres infield, yet there was quite a wall of black defenders there inside him. Is he pulling people out to get more space, so then he can pull people out, so then he can go mark Peter Steph out there way in the open? So you just wonder, I know there's been a lot of bloodletting and carrying on and pointing fingers at this and that over the last 24 hours, but things like the communication, Kirst, when you see individual things happening, And when I say individual things, like people are trying their best,
Mm.
but they're trying to do it individually, and then that's usually a sign that, hey, we're not communicating, we're not talking to each other. And unfortunately, when you go off on tangents and by yourself, then you can't compete with a team that's in tune and in sync, and the world's best team, which South Africa clearly is on World Cup recent history and their performance in Wellington Curse. So it's an interesting one. I know it seems like a soft word, but communication is broadly looking at some of the stuff just helps you get on the same page. And that second half, when it all started to, I guess, unravel, it didn't look like we were on the same page.
So, what's the great quote from a former coach of yours around individuals?
Well, yes, the great Ted used to always say, miracles don't win test matches. And what he means by that, and look, I don't know if I've been authorised to quote Sir Graham, but he certainly mentioned it to me on more than one occasion. Is you can't go chasing something, and you certainly can't go chasing something by yourself. And that's the whole miracles don't win test matches. So that was always his one liner to us, and by that he means you've got to go back to working together and in the system, so to speak, or what you've trained, what you've practiced, because you start going off on your own tangents. Well, no one else knows how they fit into that, or what their role is in it. And there was just things happening, and that could be defensively, it could be ball in hand. As soon as you start to get individual, it's very unlikely. Yes, of course, you often see moments of individual brilliance, but you don't see a collective team effort through individuals. You've always got to be on the same page and ensuring curse. So it just started to look like we got individual in that last 20, and I know there's been talk about effort and what have you. I'm sure that's not even an issue. I can't buy into that. But what sometimes it can look like when guys are off doing their own thing, that they're not together doing it together, and that's when it can start to become a problem.
Here's an individual try that was a team effort, Beav, and it will potentially be our Black Magic All Black of the weekend, which we want you to cast your vote. Who was the standout All Black of the weekend? And I know it's always tough when the All Blacks don't win. Clearly, there were a number of standout plays for South Africa, but for who was your Black Magic All Black of the weekend? That try in the first half that you're calling, Beav, the try of the century, the finisher of that.
Leroy Carter. Yep. When I look at across the field, all things considering, my Black Magic All Black of the weekend is Leroy Carter, of course, brought to us by our great mates at Black Magic Tackle, who are gearing up for spring and all the excitement that comes of spring fishing. I thought, all things considering, he was marking, as we've mentioned, if not the world's best rugby player, certainly one of them. He was everywhere. He didn't shirk any of the tough stuff. He went looking for work, as he always does when he was wearing a Chiefs jersey. He started a couple of wonderful attacks for the All Blacks in that first half when there was momentum, when there was speed to a game. He popped in at halfback at one point and got a big momentum shift for the All Blacks. And we've mentioned a couple of his real shining moments, including that wonderful try. So I think Leroy Carter, in all, a debut to be proud of. Obviously, the result he'd have loved differently, but all in all, I thought he did himself very proud.
He bamboozled a few people with his footwork early on in that match. But in the second half, that try that Cheslin Kolbe scored directly on him, is that the thing that would give you nightmares as a player? Or do you just go, there is nothing I could have done?
Yeah, look, as a player, when you know of a few different individuals on the opposition team, and you know that you've all of a sudden got a one-on-one with them, and there's not someone right next to you. And when I'm saying right next to you, I want someone touching me from my team if I've got Cheslin Kolbe one-on-one with me, because I know I'm going to end up on my heels and I'm going to be left chasing shadows at best. And I don't think Leroy Carter can beat himself up about that curse. He's not going to be the only one, and he isn't the only one who's going to have been left dead by the great Cheslin Kolbe. It's I'd say it's a long, long list to join.
Yeah, at the end of the day, there are fingers being pointed, but that's because, as we know, the expectations and the standards around this All Blacks team is so high, and it will forever be that high because that's just what has been set over the decades and decades of All Black rugby. You also have to give some appreciation to the Springboks side, and we are going to do that in part 2 of the aftermatch. But just before we get into that part 2, Beav, we've obviously
Yes.
done ratings this year. How did you rate the second 40 from the Springboks? Does that get a perfect 10 from you?
I'm glad you asked me for a Springboks rating. Second half rating from the Springboks, 9. We'll give them a 9.
Oh, come on. All things considered, and we know what you consider the occasion,
Yes.
the opposition. They came to New Zealand and they demolished the All Blacks at home in a record performance. And to be fair, Beef, they did it in style. Like, it was not pretty if you were an All Blacks fan, but again, you just had to sit back and go, wow-wee, at some of the things that they were doing. They only get a 9?
Okay, you've talked me into a 10. I'll give them a 10. There you go, Kirst. We'll give them a 10 for one of the most powerful, dynamic, complete second halves you could ever wish to see.
You were deducting them a point just because you're an All Blacks fan.
Yeah, if it was against Australia, I'd have given them a 12, but because it was against us, they get a 9.
Okay, so the perfect 10 from Beav. Good to know. Hey, look, we're going to do another podcast based on the Boks, so part 2, and look at the rest of the Rugby Championship as well. And then later on in the week, we're actually going to do a podcast based on your questions. So vote away for your All Black Black Magic player of the weekend, but also send in any questions, any comments that you have that you want us to answer. It can be about whatever. It can be about the Boks, the All Blacks, international rugby in general, even the NPC. Throw in your questions and your comments below, and we will record another episode later in the week specifically answering your questions, because this podcast is nothing without you. We appreciate you watching. We appreciate all of you who like and subscribe the podcast as well. We'll see you for part 2 of the aftermatch with Kirsten Beav.
I tell you what, throw in a question, and the best couple, we'll send out some Black Magic gear too as well.
You're feeling generous today.
Oh,
Look at you. 10 out of 10 and free prize packs.
anything for our great listeners.
Beef.
It is spring. We've got to get everyone in the water catching snapper.